Stop being selful. Your brother's twins need a bigger yard, Mom said, standing in my backyard with a realtor. We're listing it next week. You'll stay in the garage apartment. My sister-in-law laughed. That night, I called my real estate attorney. The one who'd helped me close on this property 3 years ago when I was 26, fresh off my nursing school graduation, working double shifts to scrape together a down payment while living in a studio apartment that smelled like someone else's cooking. The house wasn't much, a 1950s ranch with original pink bathroom tile and a backyard barely big enough for a vegetable garden, but it was mine. Every creaky floorboard, every outdated fixture, every single mortgage payment made on time. Elena, Robert said when he picked up, his voice cautious. He'd met my mother exactly once, at the closing. That had been enough. What's going on? I explained the situation in clinical detail, the way I'd learned to describe symptoms during nursing rounds. My mother had shown up unannounced at 2 in the afternoon with Vanessa, my brother Tyler's wife, and a woman named Christine who apparently worked for the same real estate agency that had sold me the house. They'd walked around my backyard measuring things with one of those rolling wheel devices while I stood at the kitchen window, frozen with a half-eaten sandwich in my hand. When I finally went outside, my mother didn't even look embarrassed. She had that expression she always wore when she'd already made a decision and expected the world to fall in line, chin slightly raised, lips pressed into a thin smile that never reached her eyes. The twins need space to run around, she'd said, gesturing at my modest yard like it was some kind of public park being wasted on a single woman. Tyler and Vanessa's condo only has that tiny balcony. You don't even use this space properly. When was the last time you mowed? Last Saturday, I'd said, my voice barely above a whisper. I mowed last Saturday. Vanessa had laughed at that, this bright, tinkling sound that made my teeth hurt. Well, it doesn't show. Anyway, Christine says we can list it next week and you can move into the garage apartment Tyler helped you convert. It'll be cozy. The garage apartment. The one I'd spent 6 months of weekends turning into a rental unit, installing drywall and plumbing, painting until my shoulders ached, so I could bring in extra income to pay down my student loans faster. The one that currently housed Marcus, a respiratory therapist who paid his rent on time and kept his space immaculate. You can't list my house, I'd said. My mother had sighed, that particular sigh that meant I was being difficult again. Don't be dramatic, Elena. We're family. Family helps each other. Tyler needs this more than you do right now. He has children. I have a mortgage. Which you can keep paying, just from the apartment. The twins need a yard. Stop being selfish. That's when I'd gone inside, locked the door, and called Robert. They can't force you to sell, he said now, his tone shifting into professional mode. It's your property. Your name on the deed. Unless there's something you haven't told me about co-signers or joint ownership, nothing. Just me. I bought it myself. Then they have no legal standing whatsoever. None. Tell them no and lock your doors. I did tell them no. Via text message, because I couldn't trust my voice not to shake. My mother called 17 times that evening. I let every single call go to voicemail. Tyler texted me a long paragraph about family loyalty and how disappointed our late father would be, which made me throw my phone across the room hard enough to crack the screen protector. Vanessa posted on social media about how some people forget where they came from and refuse to help family in need, no names mentioned but tagged in a way that made it obvious. 3 of my cousins shared it. I picked up an extra shift at the hospital that week, working in the ICU where the constant alarms and urgent needs of strangers kept me from thinking about my own problems. On my break, I sat in my car and did something I'd been avoiding for years. I called my Aunt Judith, my father's younger sister. Elena, she said warmly. Haven't heard from you in months. How's the house? That's actually why I'm calling. I explained everything, my words tumbling out faster as I went. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end. Your mother tried this with your father's life insurance, did you know that? Judith finally said. After he passed. Told me Tyler needed it for his business degree and that you'd be fine because you were going into nursing and would always have job security. She wanted me to convince your dad to change the beneficiaries before he died. I told her to absolutely not, that it was his decision to split it between you and Tyler equally. My hands had gone cold despite the May heat. I didn't know that. There's probably a lot you don't know. Your mother has always had this way of rewriting reality to suit whatever she needs at the moment. Tyler's her favorite, always has been, even when you were kids. I used to try to point it out to your dad, but he'd just say she was harder on you because she wanted you to be strong. Judith paused. You are strong, Elena. Don't let her take your house. That conversation stayed with me through my next shift and the one after that. I started documenting everything: screenshots of texts, recordings of voicemail messages. I lived in a one-party consent state, even a small notebook where I wrote down dates and times of interactions. Robert had suggested it during our second phone call, his voice grim. If they escalate, you want a paper trail. They escalated. My mother showed up at the hospital and tried to have me paged, claiming it was a family emergency. When that didn't work, the charge nurse knew me well enough to check first. She waited in the parking lot by my car. I saw her from the fourth-floor window and ended up calling security to escort me out. She shouted something about ungrateful daughters as the security guard, a kind older man named Dennis, walked me to my vehicle. "You okay?" he asked. "Family stuff," I said, which felt like a massive understatement. Tyler came next. He knocked on my door at 6 a.m. on my day off, waking me from the first decent sleep I'd had in a week. I looked through the peephole and saw him standing there with the twins, my 3-year-old nephew and niece, looking confused in their matching pajamas. I didn't open the door. "Elena, come on," he called out. "Let's talk about this like adults. The kids want to see their aunt." Using the children as props made something crystallize inside me. I texted him from inside the house, "Leave my property or I'm calling the police for trespassing." He left, but not before taking several photos of my house from the street and posting them online with a caption about how his sister lived in a 3-bedroom house all alone while his children were crammed into a 2-bedroom condo. The comments were predictably awful. Half our extended family weighed in about millennial selfishness and the importance of putting family first. I made my social media accounts private and blocked anyone who'd commented. Marcus, my tenant, caught me crying in the backyard the next evening while I was trying to weed the garden beds. He was a quiet guy, mid-30s, who mostly kept to himself except for the occasional wave hello. Now he stood at the fence line between the main house and the apartment, holding a bag of takeout. "Everything all right?" he asked. I wiped my face with my dirt-covered hands, which probably made things worse. "Family drama? They want me to give them my house." His eyebrows shot up. "Give them? As in for free?" "Not exactly. They want me to sell it to my brother at whatever price they decide is fair, then move into your apartment. They have this whole plan worked out where I'd have to evict you first, obviously." Marcus was quiet for a moment, then shook his head slowly. "That's wild. You want me to start paying rent 6 months in advance? Make it harder for them to force you out if they somehow try legal action?" The offer surprised me enough that I stopped crying. "You don't have to do that. I like living here. It's quiet, you fix things fast, and you've never once tried to randomly increase my rent or pull weird landlord stuff. If prepaying helps protect this situation, I'm happy to do it." We worked out an arrangement where he paid the next 6 months upfront at a slight discount, which I immediately put toward my mortgage principal. Robert had mentioned that the more equity I had, the harder it would be for anyone to make any kind of claim against the property, even a frivolous one. The harassment continued in waves. My mother would go quiet for a few days, then suddenly I'd get a flurry of texts about how Tyler was depressed, how the twins needed stability, how I was tearing the family apart over something as trivial as a house. Vanessa sent me links to smaller houses for sale across town, helpfully pointing out that they were more affordable and I could buy one of those instead. The breaking point came 3 weeks after the initial confrontation. I came home from a particularly brutal 12-hour shift. We'd lost 2 patients that day, both younger than my father had been when he died, to find my mother's car in my driveway. Again. I was so tired I could barely think straight, my scrubs still smelling like hospital disinfectant and my feet aching in a way that suggested I'd forgotten to sit down for most of the shift. She was sitting on my porch steps, and for a moment, something in me softened. She looked smaller than usual, older. Maybe we could actually talk about this like reasonable people. "Mom," I said carefully, climbing out of my car. "What are you doing here? I wanted to see if you'd come to your senses yet." Her tone was gentle, almost concerned. "Elena, honey, you look exhausted. You're working yourself to death for what? This house? When you could have a simple little apartment and no responsibilities, and Tyler could give those babies the childhood they deserve." The softness evaporated. "This house is my responsibility? One I chose. One I can handle. But why would you want to? You're young, you're single, you don't need all this space. Tyler has a family. So because I don't have children, my home doesn't matter?" She stood up, brushing off her slacks. "Don't twist my words. I'm thinking about what's best for everyone. The twins would thrive here. You'd be fine anywhere. It's simple math. The math is that I own this house and Tyler doesn't. That's the only math that matters. Her expression hardened. You're being incredibly selfish, Elena. I didn't raise you to be this way. You didn't raise me at all, I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. You raised Tyler. I just sort of existed alongside him. The slap came so fast I barely registered it. One moment we were standing 3 feet apart, the next my cheek was stinging and my mother was already walking back to her car, her spine rigid with anger. Don't contact me until you're ready to apologize and do the right thing, she called over her shoulder. I stood in my driveway until her taillights disappeared, then went inside, locked every door and window, and called Robert again. She hit you? His voice was tight with controlled anger. It doesn't matter. It absolutely matters. Elena, this has gone beyond family drama. This is harassment at minimum, assault technically. You need to consider filing for a restraining order. The thought made me feel sick, but I couldn't argue with the logic. I'd been documenting everything, just like he'd suggested. The texts, the voicemails, the showing up at my workplace, the showing up at my home repeatedly after being told to leave. Now physical violence? Let me think about it, I said. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I went through every interaction with my family over the past 3 years, seeing them with new clarity. The time Tyler had borrowed $500 for emergency car repairs and never paid it back. The way my mother always scheduled family dinners at times she knew I'd be working, then complained when I couldn't make it. Vanessa's habit of asking me to babysit, then acting annoyed when I couldn't drop everything, despite the fact that I worked in healthcare and my schedule was made weeks in advance. The pattern had always been there. I'd just been too close to see it. By morning, I'd made a decision. I filed for a restraining order against my mother, citing the escalating harassment, the workplace confrontation, and the physical assault. Robert helped me prepare the paperwork, and we included every piece of documentation I collected. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks out. Tyler called me from an unknown number the next day, his voice shaking with fury. A restraining order? Against our mother? Are you out of your mind? She hit me. She barely touched you. Don't be dramatic. She's been harassing me for weeks about giving up my house. She showed up at my workplace. She trespassed on my property multiple times. The slap was just the final incident in a pattern of behavior. This is insane. You're going to tear this family apart over a misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, Tyler. She wants my house for you. I said no. That should have been the end of it. He hung up on me. The restraining order was granted. Temporary at first, pending a full hearing, but it was enough to keep my mother away from both my home and my workplace. The relief was immediate and overwhelming. I hadn't realized how much tension I'd been carrying until it was suddenly, partially lifted. But the battle wasn't over. Update 1. The restraining order changed everything and nothing. My mother couldn't contact me directly anymore, but that didn't stop the rest of the family from becoming her messengers. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had opinions about my choices. My grandmother called to tell me I was breaking my mother's heart. An uncle I barely knew sent me a long email about forgiveness and Christian values, which was ironic given that I couldn't remember the last time he'd set foot in a church. Tyler stopped speaking to me entirely, which honestly felt like a relief. Vanessa blocked me on all social media, then unblocked me long enough to send a message calling me a vindictive witch before blocking me again. The twins' birthday came and went. I wasn't invited to the party. Work became my sanctuary. At the hospital, nobody cared about my family drama. They cared whether I could start in 4 on the first try, whether I noticed subtle changes in a patient's condition, whether I showed up for my shifts ready to handle whatever emergency came through the doors. I picked up extra hours, partly because I needed the money, legal fees were adding up, and partly because being busy kept me from dwelling on the growing rift. Marcus noticed, though. One evening when I was dragging myself home after a double shift, he was sitting on the back steps of his apartment, drinking what looked like iced tea. "You're going to burn out," he said without preamble. "I'm fine. You work 64 hours this week. I've been counting the times your car comes and goes. That's not sustainable." I sat down next to him, too tired to be annoyed at the observation. "How do you know my schedule?" "I'm a respiratory therapist. I know what healthcare hours look like. Also, your car has a distinctive rattle when you pull into the driveway." We sat in silence for a while, watching the sun set behind the neighbor's fence. Finally, Marcus said, my family tried to take my inheritance once. After my dad died. Said I didn't deserve it because I'd moved away for work and hadn't been there during his illness. What did you do? Hired a lawyer and fought them. Took 2 years and cost me a relationship with my sister, but I won. The thing nobody tells you is that sometimes family is just people who share your DNA, and not all of them have your best interests at heart. His words settled into me like stones dropping into water, creating ripples I'd feel for days. The full restraining order hearing arrived on a Tuesday morning in late June. I'd requested the day off from work and spent the previous evening with Robert, going over every detail. He'd coached me on how to testify, how to stay calm, how to present the facts without letting emotion overwhelm me. My mother showed up with her own lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in an expensive suit. Tyler sat in the back row, glowering. Vanessa was notably absent, probably home with the twins. The judge was a middle-aged man with gray hair and reading glasses that he kept adjusting as he reviewed the paperwork. He listened to my testimony first, going through the timeline of events. The initial confrontation in my backyard. The repeated contacts despite my requests to stop. The workplace incident. The early morning visit with the children. Finally, the slap. And you have documentation of all this? He asked. Robert handed over our evidence packet. Text messages, voicemail transcripts, witness statements from Marcus and from Dennis the security guard, even the social media posts that Tyler and Vanessa had made about me. My mother's lawyer tried to paint me as oversensitive and vindictive. She emphasized the family relationship, suggested that I was overreacting to normal family disagreements, pointed out that my mother was only trying to help facilitate what she believed was best for everyone. Your Honor, the lawyer said, her voice smooth and practiced, this is a family matter that has been blown entirely out of proportion. Ms. Rodriguez is attempting to use the court system to punish her mother for having an opinion about property usage within the family. The so-called assault was, at most, a momentary loss of composure after weeks of her daughter's hostile and unreasonable behavior. The judge looked over his glasses at me. Ms. Rodriguez, do you have anything to add? I'd practiced this part with Robert, but now that the moment was here, the rehearsed words felt hollow. Instead, I spoke from somewhere deeper. I bought my house with money I earned working as a nurse. I've never missed a mortgage payment. I've maintained the property and been a responsible homeowner. When my mother decided that my brother deserved my house more than I did, I said no. That should have been the end of it. I took a breath, steadying myself. Instead, I've been harassed for weeks. She showed up at my workplace and tried to have me pulled out of patient care. She came to my home repeatedly. She tried to involve my niece and nephew as leverage. And when I finally told her that I couldn't keep doing this, she hit me. The restraining order isn't about punishing her for having an opinion. It's about protecting myself from someone who has repeatedly demonstrated that she won't respect my boundaries or my property rights. The judge was quiet for a long moment, reading through the evidence again. Finally, he looked up. I'm granting the restraining order for 1 year, he said. Mrs. Rodriguez, you are to have no contact with your daughter, no phone calls, no text messages, no emails, no third-party communications. You are not to come within 500 feet of her residence or workplace. If you violate this order, you will be subject to immediate arrest. My mother's face went white, then red. Her lawyer put a hand on her arm, but she shook it off and stood abruptly. This is ridiculous, she said, her voice sharp enough to cut. You can't keep a mother from her own daughter. The judge's expression didn't change. I can, and I have. This hearing is concluded. Tyler caught up with me in the parking lot. Robert was still inside, gathering paperwork, and I thought I could make it to my car unnoticed. I was wrong. I hope you're happy, Tyler said, his voice low and angry. You got what you wanted. Mom's a mess, the whole family thinks you're unstable, and for what? A house? I turned to face him fully, something shifting inside me. No, Tyler. For my home. There's a difference, even if you can't see it. The twins needed that space. Then you should have bought a house with a yard when you were looking for places. You chose a condo. You don't get to decide 3 years later that you want my house instead. We couldn't afford a house back then. I was just finishing my degree. And I was working doubles while going through nursing school. We all make choices. You don't get to override mine because you decided you want something different now. His jaw clenched. Mom was right about you. You've always been selfish. If protecting what I've worked for makes me selfish, then fine. I'm selfish. But you showing up at my house before dawn with your kids, trying to manipulate me? What does that make you? He didn't have an answer for that. He turned and walked away, and I realized I didn't care if I ever spoke to him again. The silence from my family after the hearing was deafening. No more text messages from cousins. No more calls from relatives I barely knew. It was as if I'd been erased from the family tree entirely. For the first week, I felt guilty. Then angry. Then, slowly, something like relief. I started actually using my backyard. Planted tomatoes and herbs, set up a small patio table, hung string lights along the fence. Marcus helped me build raised garden beds one weekend, and we discovered we both had a tendency to over-engineer simple projects, which led to beds that were probably sturdy enough to survive a tornado. "These will outlast both of us," he said, stepping back to admire our handiwork. "Good." That was the plan. I made friends with my neighbors, the elderly couple on one side who brought me zucchini from their garden, and the young family on the other who sometimes asked if I could look at their daughter's rashes because I was a nurse and therefore obviously an expert in all medical things. I wasn't, but I could usually tell them whether something needed a doctor or would resolve on its own. Work continued to be intense but rewarding. I got promoted to senior nurse in the ICU, which came with a small raise and a lot more responsibility. I took the extra money and put it toward finishing my basement, turning it into a proper living space with a bedroom and bathroom. Not because I needed it, but because I wanted to. My house was becoming the home I'd imagined when I bought it. Slowly, and perfectly, but entirely on my own terms. 3 months after the hearing, I got a letter from a law firm I didn't recognize. My stomach dropped as I opened it, expecting some new legal challenge from my family. Instead, it was from Aunt Judith's attorney. She'd passed away suddenly from a heart attack and she'd left me something in her will. The something turned out to be $50,000 and a letter. I sat in the lawyer's office, a modern space with uncomfortable chairs and abstract art on the walls, while a junior associate explained the details of the inheritance. The money was straightforward, a cashier's check that felt surreal in my hands. But the letter was what mattered. Judith had written it 6 months before she died, not long after our phone conversation about my mother. "Dear Elena," it began in her precise handwriting. "If you're reading this, I'm gone, and I hope you're doing well. I've been thinking a lot about family lately and what we owe each other. Your father, my brother, believed family was everything. But I think he sometimes confused family with obligation, and there's a difference. You don't owe anyone your home, your security, or your peace of mind just because you share DNA. I watched your mother favor Tyler your entire childhood, and I watched you work twice as hard for half the recognition. You deserved better then, and you deserve better now. Use this money however you want. Pay off your mortgage, invest it, take a vacation, or stick it in a savings account and forget about it. It's yours, no strings attached. Just like your house is yours. Your life is yours. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. You're stronger than you know, and your father would be proud of who you've become, even if your mother can't see it. With love, Aunt Judith." I cried in my car for 20 minutes before driving home. The inheritance changed things in practical ways. I paid off a significant chunk of my mortgage, which dropped my monthly payment enough that I could work fewer overtime shifts. But it also changed something psychological. Judith had seen me, really seen me, and had validated everything I'd been feeling but couldn't quite articulate. I framed her letter and hung it in my bedroom where I'd see it every morning. Life settled into a new normal. I worked my regular shifts, tended my garden, occasionally had dinner with Marcus on the patio while we complained about hospital politics and shared respiratory therapist versus nurse stories. I joined a book club at the local library. I adopted a cat from the shelter, a grumpy orange tabby who immediately claimed my favorite chair. The restraining order would expire in 9 months, and I tried not to think about what would happen then. But the universe, as it turned out, had other plans. Update 2. I hadn't expected to see Vanessa at the grocery store. It was a Saturday afternoon in October, nearly 5 months after the restraining order hearing. I was in the produce section, trying to decide between regular tomatoes and the overpriced heirloom ones, when I heard a familiar voice from the next aisle over. "No, sweetie, we can't get those. They have too much sugar." I peered around the corner and saw her, pushing a cart with the twins strapped into the seat, both of them reaching for a box of cookies. She looked different, thinner, more tired. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she was wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt that had seen better days. I should have just walked away. Should have gone to a different section and avoided the confrontation entirely. But something made me stay frozen, watching. She caught sight of me the same moment I decided to move. For a second, We just stared at each other across the produce displays, the awkwardness thick enough to cut. Then, unexpectedly, she walked over. "Elena," she said quietly. The twins didn't seem to recognize me, which stung more than I expected. "Vanessa?" A long pause. She looked down at her cart, then back at me. "How are you?" "Fine. You?" "Tired," she laughed, but it sounded hollow. "Tyler's been working late a lot. The condo is feeling smaller every day. The twins have been asking about the house with the backyard." I didn't know what to say to that. We stood in uncomfortable silence while shoppers maneuvered around us, probably wondering why two women were blocking the aisle. "Look," Vanessa finally said, "I wanted to apologize. For my part in everything. The whole thing with your house, it was wrong. Your mother was so insistent, and Tyler was stressed about money, and I just went along with it because it seemed easier than pushing back. You posted about me online. Called me selfish. I know. I deleted those posts, for what it's worth. After the restraining order hearing, I started really thinking about what we'd done. Showing up with the realtor, trying to pressure you into giving up your home. It was so far out of line." She shifted her weight, looking genuinely uncomfortable. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry." One of the twins started fussing, reaching for a display of oranges. Vanessa automatically handed him a small container of crackers from her purse, the practice motion of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because I was wrong. Because your mother has been calling me almost daily, trying to get me to convince Tyler to fight the restraining order, and I've started seeing how manipulative she actually is. Because I used my kids as props to guilt you, and that was awful." She paused. "And because Tyler just lost his job. That caught me off guard." "What?" "He got laid off 3 weeks ago. His whole department got cut. We're behind on the condo fees, and I went back to work part-time, but it's not enough." She blinked rapidly, fighting tears. "We might have to move in with your mother temporarily, and the thought makes me want to scream. Her place is tiny, and she's already started talking about how this wouldn't be a problem if you'd just been reasonable about the house." The irony was almost too much. They'd wanted my house so desperately that they'd harassed me for weeks, and now they were worse off than when they started. But looking at Vanessa's exhausted face and the twins in the cart, I couldn't quite enjoy the vindication. "I'm sorry about Tyler's job," I said carefully. "That's really difficult." "Yeah." She wiped her eyes quickly. "Anyway, I should go. The kids need lunch. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, and I hope you're doing well." She turned to leave, then stopped and looked back. "Your house looks nice, by the way. I drove past it last month. The garden looks really good." Then she was gone, disappearing around the corner with the twins and leaving me standing alone with my half-filled basket and a strange mix of emotions I couldn't quite name. I finished my shopping in a daze and drove home, the encounter playing on repeat in my mind. Vanessa's apology had seemed genuine, but it was hard to separate sincerity from desperation. Was she sorry because she genuinely realized they were wrong, or because their situation had gotten worse and she needed to mend bridges? Marcus was working in the garden when I got home, pulling weeds from around the tomato plants. "You look like you saw a ghost," he observed. I told him about the grocery store encounter while we worked, pulling carrots that had somehow grown to ridiculous sizes in the fall cool weather. "So she apologized," he said thoughtfully. "How do you feel about that?" "I don't know." "Confused?" She seemed genuine, but then she told me about Tyler losing his job, and I couldn't tell if the apology was real or just groundwork for asking for help later. Could be both. People are complicated like that. We worked in silence for a while, the October sun warm on our backs. Finally, Marcus said, "My sister apologized to me too. About 3 years after our dad's inheritance fight. I'd pretty much written off ever having a relationship with her again, and then she just showed up one day and said she was sorry." "Did you forgive her?" "Eventually. Took time though. Trust isn't something you can just hand back over like returning a borrowed book." He pulled up a particularly stubborn weed with a grunt. But it turned out she'd been in therapy and had done real work on herself. We have an okay relationship now. Not what it was before, but something. "Do you think I should reach out to Vanessa?" "I think you should do whatever feels right for you. Not for her, not for your brother, not for those kids. For you." That night, I sat in my living room with my cat curled up on my lap and thought about forgiveness. About what I owed my family and what I owed myself. About the difference between being compassionate and being a doormat. I didn't reach out to Vanessa. But I also didn't block her number, which felt like a decision in itself. 2 weeks later, my mother violated the restraining order. She called me from a number I didn't recognize, and I answered because I was expecting a call back from a doctor's office about test results. Her voice on the other end made my whole body go tense. "Elena, don't hang up. Please. I just need 5 minutes." I should have hung up immediately and called the police. That's what Robert had advised if she ever contacted me. Instead, I stayed on the line, silent. "I heard about you running into Vanessa," my mother continued. "She told me you were kind to her even though you didn't have to be. I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I realize I handled everything wrong." "You want my house for Tyler," I said flatly. "No." "Well, yes, at first. But that's not what this call is about. Tyler's situation is his responsibility, not yours. I should never have tried to make it your problem." She paused, and I heard something that sounded like a shaky breath. "I went to a therapist. My doctor recommended it after the restraining order. I've been going every week for 3 months now." This was so unexpected that I almost dropped my phone. My mother, who thought therapy was for weak people with real problems, was seeing a therapist. Dr. Harrison helped me understand some things about how I parent. About favoritism and control and why I thought it was acceptable to try to pressure you into giving up your home. Another pause. "I'm not calling to ask you to drop the restraining order or to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I'm working on myself, and I understand why you did what you did. You hit me," I said quietly. "I know. That was unforgivable. I've never hit anyone before, and I have no excuse for why I did it to you. I was angry that you weren't falling in line like you always had before, and I lashed out." Her voice cracked. "I'm ashamed of myself, Elena. More than I can properly express over the phone." We sat in silence for a moment, the phone line crackling slightly. "I should go," I finally said. "Wait. Before you do, Tyler knows I'm calling you. He thinks I'm wrong to reach out, but I needed you to know that what happened wasn't your fault. You set a boundary, and I trampled all over it. That's on me, not you." After we hung up, I did call the police to report the restraining order violation. The officer who took my statement sounded bored until I mentioned that it was my mother who'd called. "And what did she say during the call?" he asked. I explained, feeling strange about turning my mother's quasi-apology into a police report. The officer was quiet for a moment. "You want to press charges?" "Did I?" My mother had violated a court order, which was a criminal offense. But she'd done it to apologize, to acknowledge wrongdoing. Pressing charges would mean criminal court, more legal fees, more family drama. "Can I think about it?" I asked. "Sure. Call back within 48 hours if you want to move forward. We'll document the violation either way." I spent the next day and a half in a fog of indecision. Part of me wanted to throw the book at her. She'd made my life miserable for weeks, hit me, and now she'd violated a court order. But another part kept replaying her voice on the phone, the genuine shame I'd heard there. Robert's opinion was clear when I called him. Violation is violation. She knew the terms of the order and broke them anyway. The consequences are meant to deter future contact. But what if she really is trying to change? Then she can do that without contacting you. That's literally the point of the restraining order. In the end, I didn't press charges. I let the violation stand as documented but told the police I didn't want to pursue criminal prosecution. Robert thought I was making a mistake. Marcus just shrugged and said it was my choice to make. The holidays approached with a kind of dread I'd never felt before. Thanksgiving had always been at my mother's house, a massive production with extended family and too much food. Christmas was the same. Now I had no idea what I was supposed to do. Vanessa texted me in mid-November. Just a simple message: "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but if you're alone for Thanksgiving, you're welcome to join us. No pressure. Tyler doesn't know I'm reaching out." I stared at that message for 20 minutes before responding. "Thanks for the offer. I'm working that day anyway." Which was true. I'd volunteered for the holiday shift, partly because the pay was good and partly because I wanted to avoid the whole situation. The hospital on Thanksgiving was simultaneously depressing and oddly uplifting. Depressing because people were sick and injured on a holiday. Uplifting because the staff who worked were usually the ones who genuinely cared, and there was a camaraderie in being there together. We had a potluck in the break room during shift change. Someone brought a whole turkey, someone else brought stuffing, and there were enough pies to feed twice our number. I sat with a respiratory therapist from a different department, not Marcus, who had the day off, and a surgical nurse who told increasingly ridiculous stories about things people had gotten stuck in places they shouldn't have. For a few hours, I forgot about my family drama entirely. December brought unexpected developments. Tyler called me from his own number, which surprised me enough that I answered. "I got a new job," he said without preamble. "Starts in January. Better pay than the last one." "That's great," I said carefully, unsure where this was going. "Yeah. We're staying in the condo." Vanessa helped me realize we've been living beyond our means, trying to keep up with what we thought we should have instead of what we could actually afford. He cleared his throat. "I'm calling to apologize. For showing up at your house with the kids. For the social media posts. For supporting Mom when she was completely out of line." This was becoming a pattern, unexpected apologies from people who'd spent months making my life difficult. "Why now?" I asked. "Therapy, mostly." Vanessa insisted we go to couples counseling when I lost my job. The counselor pointed out some patterns in how I deal with conflict and how I let Mom manipulate situations. He laughed, but it sounded bitter. "Turns out I've been her golden child in a really unhealthy way, and it screwed up my ability to set boundaries or think independently." "That's pretty self-aware." "Yeah, well, it's easier to see it now that I'm not in the middle of it. Mom tried to convince me that losing my job was somehow your fault, said I was too stressed about the house situation to focus at work." The counselor helped me see how absurd that was. We talked for another 10 minutes, the conversation stilted but not hostile. He told me about the twins' preschool, about Vanessa's part-time job at a dental office, about his new position at a different tech company. I told him about my promotion, about my garden, about the cat. "Maybe we could have coffee sometime," he said as we were wrapping up. "When you're ready. No pressure." "Maybe," I agreed, noncommittal but not dismissive. After we hung up, I sat on my couch feeling like the world had tilted slightly. All this time, I'd been bracing for continued attacks, for escalation, for more legal battles. Instead, people were apologizing and going to therapy and apparently developing self-awareness. It felt suspicious and genuine all at once. Christmas Eve found me at home with Marcus, who also had no family plans. We decided to cook an elaborate dinner together, duck instead of turkey, homemade pasta, a chocolate cake that required more steps than seemed reasonable. We drank wine and listened to jazz and carefully avoided talking about anything heavy. "This is nice," Marcus said as we were cleaning up, both of us slightly tipsy and full of good food. "Better than spending it alone." "Much better," I agreed. He looked at me for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. "I've been wanting to ask you something." My heart rate picked up slightly. We'd been dancing around something for months, this undefined thing that was more than landlord-tenant and more than just friendship. "Okay," I said. "Would you want to go on an actual date sometime? Not just cooking together or working in the garden, but a proper date where we acknowledge that this is what we're doing?" I smiled, feeling warmth spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the wine. "I'd like that." "Good. Because I've been thinking about asking for weeks, but I didn't want to make things weird given that I rent from you." "Things are already a little weird," I pointed out. We built garden beds together and had deep conversations about family trauma. A date seems almost normal by comparison. We went out the following weekend to a small Italian restaurant downtown. It was surprisingly easy, the conversation flowing naturally from topic to topic. He told me about his respiratory therapy work, about a patient who'd cried when Marcus helped them breathe properly for the first time in days. I told him about the ICU, about the moments of genuine connection that happened even in the worst circumstances. "Do you ever think about what you'd do if you weren't a nurse?" he asked over dessert. "Sometimes. Maybe teaching, or working in public health policy. Something where I could still help people but with less direct exposure to trauma." I paused, considering. "But honestly, I like what I do. Even on the hard days." "That's rare. Most people I know just tolerate their jobs." "What about you?" "I love it. There's something incredible about helping someone breathe easier, literally giving them air." He smiled. Sounds cheesy when I say it out loud, but it's true. We were walking back to his car when my phone rang. Unknown number again, but this time I let it go to voicemail. When I checked it later, it was my mother's voice, shaky and uncertain. "Elena, it's me. I'm not trying to violate the order, I'm calling to let you know the restraining order expires in 2 weeks, and I wanted to ask if you'd be willing to meet with me and my therapist. No pressure if you don't want to. Dr. Harrison suggested it might help us both get some closure, but only if you're comfortable." You can call her office directly if you want to arrange it without talking to me. The number is. I saved the voicemail but didn't call back right away. Instead, I talked to Robert about it during our regular check-in. Family therapy can be helpful, he said cautiously. But only if you actually want to repair the relationship. If you're doing it out of obligation or guilt, it won't work and might make things worse. I don't know what I want, I admitted. Then maybe wait until you do. There's no rush. The restraining order expiring doesn't mean you have to have contact with her. It just means she's legally allowed to try to contact you again. I thought about it for days, weighing the potential benefits against the risk of reopening old wounds. Finally, I called Dr. Harrison's office and scheduled an initial consultation, just me and the therapist, no mother present. Dr. Harrison was a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Her office was filled with plants and comfortable chairs that didn't try too hard to look professional. "Elena," she said warmly. "Thank you for coming in. I want to start by saying that everything we discussed today is confidential unless you give me permission to share it with your mother. This session is about you and what you need." We talked for an hour. I explained the whole situation from my perspective: the house, the harassment, the restraining order, the recent apologies. Dr. Harrison listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. "Your mother has been working on understanding her patterns," she said when I finished. "She's acknowledged that she shows favoritism toward your brother and has used you as the family's emotional shock absorber, the one who's expected to be reasonable and accommodating while others get to be demanding." "That's accurate," I said quietly. "The question is whether you want to work toward having a relationship with her again, and if so, what boundaries that relationship would need to have." She leaned forward slightly. "You don't owe her a relationship, Elena. Not even if she's changed. Change is great, but it doesn't erase the harm that was done. Part of me wants my mom back," I admitted. "But I don't trust that this change is permanent. What if I let her in and she goes back to her old patterns?" "That's a valid concern. If you decide to try reconnecting, it would need to be gradual, with clear boundaries and consequences if those boundaries are violated. Your mother would need to understand that she's rebuilding from zero, not picking up where you left off." We scheduled another session for the following week, and Dr. Harrison gave me some reading material about family systems and healthy boundaries. I left feeling both lighter and heavier, lighter because someone had validated my feelings, heavier because I now had decisions to make. Marcus noticed my preoccupation. We'd been on 3 more dates, and things were progressing in a careful, thoughtful way that felt right for both of us. Now we were sitting in my kitchen on a Sunday morning, drinking coffee and reading the paper like an old married couple. "You're thinking about your mom," he said. "Not a question. Is it that obvious? You get this look when you're processing something heavy. Your eyebrows do this little furrow thing." I touched my forehead self-consciously. "I met with her therapist. She suggested family therapy if I want to try rebuilding the relationship." "Do you want to?" I want to," I said slowly. "Does that make sense? Like, I want to be the kind of person who can forgive and move forward. But I'm also afraid that if I do, I'm just setting myself up to be hurt again." Marcus set down his coffee mug and reached across the table to take my hand. "Here's what I learned from my situation: forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean trust comes back automatically. It just means you're willing to stop actively being angry, and maybe to give someone a chance to prove they've changed. What if they haven't really changed? Then you walk away again, but at least you'll know you tried. The closure comes from giving it a real shot, not from the outcome." His words settled into me over the next few days. I went to another session with Dr. Harrison, then finally agreed to a joint session with my mother present. The day of the session, I was so nervous I almost canceled twice. Marcus offered to drive me, but I wanted to do this on my own. I arrived 15 minutes early and sat in my car, practicing breathing exercises I'd learned from watching him work with patients. My mother was already in the waiting room when I went inside. She looked older than I remembered, her hair grayer, her face more lined. She stood when she saw me, then seemed to think better of it and sat back down. "Elena," she said softly. "Mom." Dr. Harrison came out and led us both to her office. The session started with ground rules: no yelling, no interrupting, no accusations without accepting accountability. Then she looked at my mother. "Marjorie, we've talked about what you wanted to say to Elena. Would you like to start?" My mother took a shaky breath. "I've spent the last 6 months examining my behavior as a parent, and I've come to understand that I treated you unfairly your entire life. I put expectations on you that I never put on Tyler. I dismissed your accomplishments and minimized your needs. When you set a boundary about your house, I couldn't accept it because I trained myself to see your compliance as the natural order of things. She paused, her hands twisting in her lap. The therapist helped me understand that I resented you for being independent. Tyler always needed me, needed my advice, my help, my approval. You didn't, or at least you learned not to ask for it. And instead of being proud of your independence, I punished you for it. I felt tears starting but fought them back. I hit you, my mother continued, her voice breaking. I put my hands on you in anger, and there's no excuse for that. None. I've never forgiven myself, and I don't expect you to forgive me either. I just need you to know that I see what I did, and I'm ashamed of the parent I was to you. Dr. Harrison looked at me. Elena, would you like to respond? The words came slowly at first, then faster. You made me feel like I didn't matter. Like my achievements were expected but Tyler's were celebrated. When I bought my house, you didn't even come to see it for 6 months. But when Tyler bought his condo, you helped him move in and threw him a housewarming party. My mother flinched but didn't look away. I worked so hard to make you proud, I continued, and nothing was ever enough. And then when I finally had something that was mine, something I'd earned on my own, you tried to take it and give it to him. Like my 3 years of payments and work didn't matter because he needed it more. You're right, my mother said. You're absolutely right, and I'm sorry. We talked for another 40 minutes, unpacking years of hurt and resentment. Dr. Harrison guided the conversation, keeping us on track when things got heated, asking clarifying questions when we talked past each other. By the end, I felt wrung out but also oddly hopeful. This is just a beginning, Dr. Harrison said as we wrapped up. Rebuilding trust takes time and consistency. Elena, you'll need to see your mother follow through on these insights with actual behavioral change. Marjorie, you'll need to respect Elena's boundaries even when they're inconvenient or don't align with what you want. We scheduled another session for 3 weeks out. My mother asked if she could hug me, and I said yes. It was awkward and brief, but it was something. Over the next several months, things slowly shifted. My mother sent me a text once a week, usually just something simple like thinking of you or hope work is going well. She never pushed for more than I was willing to give. When I didn't respond, she didn't follow up with guilt trips or demands. Tyler and I met for coffee in February. It was strange at first, all the old patterns trying to reassert themselves. But then he told me about his therapy sessions, and I told him about mine. I'd started going myself after the joint session with Mom, and we found common ground in trying to unlearn the family dynamics we'd grown up with. Mom called me her special boy until I was like 16, he said, looking embarrassed. The therapist pointed out how weird that was and how it set me up to expect special treatment from everyone, including you. She called me capable, I countered. Which sounds like a compliment until you realize it meant I didn't get help or comfort because I was supposed to handle everything on my own. We were both messed up, just in different ways. Yeah. We really were. Vanessa and I developed a tentative friendship. She brought the twins by one Saturday in March to see the backyard they'd been so obsessed with. They played in the garden beds and chased my cat around while Vanessa and I sat on the patio drinking iced tea. This really is a nice space, she said, looking around. I can see why you fought for it. Thanks. I like it. For what it's worth, I get it now. About the house being yours and what that means. I didn't before. I just saw square footage and opportunity. She watched the twins, who were now examining bugs in the grass. I'm teaching them about boundaries and respecting other people's stuff. Trying to do better than we did. By April, the restraining order had been expired for months, and my relationship with my mother had evolved into something new. We weren't close. Not the way some mothers and daughters were, but we were honest with each other in a way we'd never been before. She came to my house for dinner in May, the first time she'd been there since the restraining order. Marcus was there too, officially as my boyfriend now, and we'd invited Tyler and Vanessa and the twins. It was chaotic and occasionally awkward, but there were moments of genuine warmth. The twins loved the backyard, just as everyone had predicted they would. My mother complimented the garden and asked about my work. Tyler and Marcus discovered a shared interest in woodworking and spent 20 minutes discussing the merits of different types of saws. As the evening wound down and everyone was getting ready to leave, my mother pulled me aside. Thank you for giving me another chance, she said quietly. I know I didn't deserve it. We're still figuring this out, I said honestly. But I'm willing to keep trying if you are. I am. Every day. After everyone left, Marcus and I cleaned up the kitchen together, working in comfortable silence. My cat wound between our legs, hoping for dropped food. That went well, Marcus observed. It really did. Your family's still complicated, but at least now they're trying. Trying counts for a lot, I agreed. We finished the dishes and went out to the backyard, sitting on the patio chairs and watching the stars come out. My house, my home, stood solid behind us, still mine, still worth fighting for, and now filled with the possibility of relationships that had been broken but might, slowly, be healing. A final thought. There's a particular kind of strength in protecting what you've built, even when the people you love tell you you're wrong to do so. I learned that home isn't just a structure or a piece of property, it's the place where you get to decide who you are and what you'll accept. Setting boundaries with family feels like betrayal at first, especially when you've spent your whole life being the accommodating one. But sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and ultimately for them, is to say no and mean it. The people who genuinely care about you will eventually understand, even if it takes them a while to get there. The ones who don't weren't really caring about you in the first place, they were caring about what you could do for them. My garden still grows. My cat still claims my favorite chair. Marcus still lives in the apartment, though these days he spends more nights in the main house than his own space. My mother and I have coffee once a month, carefully rebuilding something that might someday look like the relationship I always wished we had. And my house is still mine. That's the thing they don't tell you about standing your ground. Sometimes you lose the battle but win something better, the knowledge that you're capable of protecting yourself, even when it costs you. Especially when it costs you. Because the price of keeping my peace was worth more than any reconciliation built on giving myself away.